Good Friday, everyone, and welcome to Rethinking Balance Sheets. Ravi Navaratnam is with me. Ravi, we've got a fabulous show lined up today. We've got amazing guest who's going to be joining us. Tell us a bit about what's to come, Ravi.
Good morning and good to be back. I'm sure it was more fun with Zarina. But I think, Roshan, people are going to start wondering, are we running a corporate finance show or a show of good-looking ladies? So for the guys out there, you want to get into corporate finance, there's all, you want to see meet all the the good-looking ladies. Yeah, we've got one more here today, so that's the first.
And maybe you can tell us a bit about what's to come today, Ravi.
Yep,
I mean, we've got Dzuleira joining us, Dzuleira Bakar from TPM. So share a little bit about her and let's grab her into the show because I think it's going to be an amazing show today.
Amazing background, Roshan. I think we put that on LinkedIn. Just amazing. And I think this is a hot topic: research, and of course the grants. I mean, it's the whole thing. I mean, from the company perspective, but it's also obviously of national interest and societal interest because everybody wants to move to the next level of knowledge, technology, know-how, research, and how governments fund it is a critical part. I mean, the society and the technology that we enjoy today is very much because governments around the world had funded these things, right?
Yep. So let's bring our guest in today, Dzuleira Bakar, the Group CEO of TPM Technology Park Malaysia. Dzuleira, welcome to the show and super glad to have you with us.
Good morning, Roshan. Good morning, Navin, and thank you for that introduction. I'm flattered indeed, but the pressure is on. You've just put so much of pressure on me in terms of what I have to talk about today. But thank you so much.
Yeah. And
thank you.
Maybe just to kick it off, Dzuleira, you can share a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you got to. I mean, you've got such a checkered and interesting career. I mean, so many different, and meeting you at different points in different roles has always been fascinating. And then I saw the announcement, TPM, wow. Tell us a bit about yourself. Yeah.
Well, I think if I were to sort of compress my journey, I keep saying that it's an accidental journey of sorts, right? I started my career in literally a company launching rockets, right? So I worked with a company called Razak Set. We even at that time they were an agency under the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation. That was really my first job. So I joined them as a young executive. I was looking at legal documentations and business development. I'm trained a lawyer, but I didn't get into practice. So I joined them. So that was sort of my first foray into tech, so to speak, right? So I was sort of introduced into the world of, say, space technology in general, engineering, mechanical as well as E&E, right? So I worked with a bunch of engineers. This sort of sparked my interest, I suppose. And we were also the first commercial payload for SpaceX at the time. Not many people know this, but we were the first commercial payload for SpaceX at the time. So I also had the absolute amazing pleasure of meeting Elon Musk at the time. Yeah, so I guess that sort of got me into the whole tech space. And then again, I was then interested into funding technology. So, which is when I started looking out for opportunities or roles rather, in areas of funding, right? So, and at that time, we had the Malaysian Venture Capital Management Berhad, which is MAVCAP, right? So I had a chat with the CEO at the time, and I must say that I wasn't, I didn't have the requisite experience to get into VC at the time, besides the fact that I was involved in technology from the product's point of view, not so much the funding point of view. But given my interest, he was like, you know what, let's give it a go. So I'm very grateful for people along in my journey that have given me the opportunity for me to get into new roles. I think that's very important for any up and coming talent. You got to believe in passion and in interest and what drives the person, right? So I've been very blessed and lucky, I would say. Yeah. So I got into VC. Picked up rather quickly because of the background that I had, and I was also trained. I also had my MBA at the time, so I was trained in business and law. So sort of, it's not rocket science in that sense, to get into venture capital. But it was a really interesting journey. I understood the whole fundamentals of funding an entity, an enterprise from inception to growth to scale. And we were also involved in bringing in funds. So we were matching funds because at the time we were working with so MFCAP is a government agency, fully funded by the government. And I was also tasked to looking at bringing in private sector capital, right? So we were doing a match in that sense. I had the opportunity of, I think I evaluated close to 400 companies across the whole technology value chain, those asking for 50,000 up to 20 million, right? So my biggest ticket size at the time, the investment that I did was about 25 million. So it was a great run. I spent about 4 years there. And then as a follow-up, I joined a PE firm, PE family office, and I think many people know about them, is Usaha Tegas, right? So that was another great run for me. I had the absolute honor and opportunity of working with the financial genius himself, Ananda Krishnan. So and even in Usaha Tegas, I worked on some very interesting projects. We worked on the allocation of funds to Peter Thiel's fund. I don't know if many are familiar with Peter Thiel, but he's one of the renowned investors in Silicon Valley. So he started off with the Founders Fund, which actually seeded many of the startups in the Silicon Valley. So we worked with him. So those were the kind of the interesting work that I did that I worked on. And then after that, I actually moved on to work with Khazanah National, actually. So that was a bit of an itch. I wanted to get into the ESG. I wanted to get into the social impact, social entrepreneurship space. So I supported Khazanah at the time when they were looking to set up the foundation, which is, it's called Yayasan Hasanah now, but when I joined them, it was still a special project under Khazanah. So again, that was another fantastic run. I met amazing people and we worked on amazing projects, right? So we were working on special projects. We were working on setting up the foundation in itself, the structure, the framework. So we looked at institutionalizing charitable organizations and social enterprises, right? Again, because charitable organizations and social enterprises play a very, very important role if properly placed in the ecosystem, because they deliver ripple impact, right? So it's not just about, it's not, it's really not a capitalist model in that sense. It's a really a 360 impact kind of thing, right? So I enjoyed that model. So I think moving on very quickly, I think the VC space got me back in. I was then asked to lead Cradle Seed Ventures at the time, right? So that was a VC fund. Again, drawing back on my experience of setting up funds and being in VC. So I was given the opportunity. And to be honest, I jumped at it because that's really my bread and butter. I think if there's one thing that I can say that I love doing is venture capital investing. I got into venture capital investing. We set up the fund at the time. I was deploying about 60 million. But again, it was early stage. Seed stage, so I was deploying anywhere between 500,000 to about 3 million ringgit Malaysia. All right, so that was a sweet spot in terms of a pre-series A seed round kind of thing, where companies are anywhere between, say, maybe about 50 to 100,000 in revenues, and they need funds to sort of launch further, right? Expansion funds. So I was in that sort of value chain. So I'm invested in about close to 12 companies. Some are doing really well now, hopefully. And like in any VC investments, you will have one home run deal and the rest will just go kaput.
You need that 1 out of 10.
Correct, that 1 out of 10. So that's pretty much in a nutshell. And then one led to the other. And I was then invited by the ministry at the time to look into magic, right? So maybe just to share a little, magic at the time was, under MEDAC. So magic at the time, they were struggling to sort of place its relevance within the ecosystem, right? But I think, quite frankly, at the time, my opinion, candidly put, was that I think magic was actually, it has a real sweet spot, right? Because we have funding agencies, we have scale-up agencies, but we do not have a capacity building focused entity that looks at providing entrepreneurship support, right? A lot of these entrepreneurs want to start companies or have started companies, but don't have a real clue as to what it actually takes to scale your company further. So I thought that magic hit that sweet spot. Unfortunately, due to a number of reasons, we weren't able to sort of stem our relevance. So when I was brought in, I felt that, it's time for us to sort of reignite Magic's purpose, vision, and role. And so, I was brought on board. And I had a good 2-year run. And just as we were settling down and running things at a certain speed, the whole concept of TCA came along, which again, it's a great honor that the ministry had trusted me to take on this role, because right now I'm in TPM, but I am working with Magic in the shadows because I'm merging both the entities. So it will be merged into one big entity. So TPM
that makes a lot of sense.
will be... Yes, so TPM will be the parent entity of Magic. I guess the whole idea makes a lot of sense because, like it or not, we actually have a lot of agencies, government agencies. So I think one great thing that came out of this whole rationalization study, so the previous minister looked at focus areas, looked at efficiency of deploying resources and funding, as well as how we operate within the value chain, right? So I thought that was needed, right? That was definitely needed. And to be fair, previous administrations, previous ministries and ministers had also set the tone in that direction. So it was eventually going to happen, right? So that's how it came into play, because TPM and Magic had some overlaps in terms of function. We had some overlaps in terms of functions. We were doing somewhat similar things, you know. Of course, Magic with the strength of the team, we had a different audience.
Right? Yes. The social
Correct. We had a different
space,
audience. We had a different audience. We had a different reach. We had a different value proposition altogether, right? So I think Mosti thought that it would be fit for us to combine and strengthen the entire value proposition as one key agency, one less agency.
Right.
Optimum deployment of funds as well as resources. Right, so I guess that's where we are right now. And again, with TPM, the value proposition is that we are an infrastructure provider. We have physical space. We span across 600 acres in Bukit Jalil. Not many people know this. We've been around since 1996. We've got various technology clusters already based out of TPM. Biotechnology, I've got RTK testing labs. I've got even vaccine manufacturers who are based out of TPM. Solution Biologics, who's the distributor of CanSino, is actually based out of TPM. We have drone technology players who have already started being in TPM. We've got the bigger companies like Memos, Iris, Upended, APU. So it's been there, but now it just needs a little bit of push, and we've just got to rejuvenate the entire space.
Amazing, and what a journey, right? and you brought up R&D, which is kind of the focus at this point in time. But I mean, a lot of people don't quite understand the landscape of research and development in Malaysia. There's universities, research institutes, corporations are doing it, and it seems to be pretty much all over, to some extent. I mean, what's your take on the landscape for R&D in Malaysia?
Okay, so I think you're right to say that not many people understand about the whole R&D journey, right? Unless you're in it, unless you're a researcher, unless you work in a university, R&D is bread and butter, right? So every university would have targets of R&D that needs to be done by each faculty, especially the STEM faculty. So I guess what's happening in the country is that we actually have a gap in terms of locally produced technology of a certain quality that is export quality and globally competitive. I mean, let's face it. We have seen a number of companies that have been getting global recognition have gone to unicorn status. Recently, it was Qasem, and I just tweeted a report this morning that Aerodyne just reached number one in terms of drone service providers globally, right? So they're just number one.
They've done really well.
They've done really well. They're on their way to becoming a unicorn, right? So we have great talent, we have great companies, but we don't have enough, unfortunately. Right? We don't have enough, unfortunately. But if you look at the R&D activity, be it in the private or public research institutions, we've got a lot going on. We actually have a lot going on. However, the trouble is, or the issue is, the R&D that is done stays in the lab, right? For whatever reasons. Key reasons, again, is the ability of it to get out of the lab, to get into the market and receive necessary support for it to launch to the market, right? Because R&D is really about getting the product up and running. Most often than not, it starts from solving a problem, right? But again, the problem that you're solving needs to meet real market problems, market demands. So most often than not, you have probably 1,000 R&Ds. I'll give you an example, right? So in a faculty, for example, you have a list of 1,000 R&Ds that the researchers are working on. Out of the 1,000, probably only less than 5% is actually viable for market, or we could actually achieve product market fit. So that's one part of it. Again, because the R&D ecosystem is actually quite complex. It's actually quite complex, and it just points to show that there's actually a disconnect between the R&D and the market. It's not so much about the talent. I think we have amazing talent in our universities. In fact, I sit on the board of University Technology Malaysia, UTM. I think talent pool is fantastic. They just need the right platform to take the R&D out from the lab and get it to market. But also, I think at the same time, what is also needed is guidance in terms of what areas we should be focusing our R&D in. I think that's very important, because you want to match, but you can't match if there's no product market fit.
So it's a connection between the public-private sort of partnership, right?
That's right. So I think from a government's perspective, MOSTI, as well as our new mandate under Technology Commercialization Accelerator, we will be working with an entity called the Research Management Agency, which sits under the Economic Planning Unit, right, under EPU, which would be sort of looking at all the R&D that's done in private as well as in the public research institutions, right? So we would have to have some form of a coherent strategy in terms of areas that the R&D needs to go into. One of the national focus areas that we're looking at is, in fact, is it development? Is it healthcare? Is it agriculture? Mission-driven in that sense, right? So I guess what we are trying to do right now is drive that direction, right? With the help of the government, of course. But TCA's role, now going back specifically to TCA's role, and why we call it TCA is because the merged entity, the whole concept is called the Technology Commercialization Accelerator. I will be announcing its new name, or rebranding
so it's TCA,
of the entity.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So TCA is just a concept for now.
Okay. But is it going to be called TCA? We don't know. You're not. That's not confirmed yet.
That's the working name, prototype name.
Okay. See, Ravi, we first announced in our show TCA. There you go.
Yeah. So it's we've actually released a couple of media releases and some public news on TCA. Sure. Again, around the concept, because we need to build awareness as to why we're actually building this commercialization accelerator. So as the name goes, our role will be to focus, to aggregate support as far as commercialization is concerned. So it will be a one-stop center where technopreneurs, R&D researchers can actually come to us for integrated support to take their products from the lab to the market. Right? In a nutshell. Wow. And this integrated support will include capacity building, will include IP review, will include IP audit, technology audit, improvements in technology, telling you whether there are other technology adjacencies that you can plug into your technology, as well as provide market support. Because we are also building a community of investors, we aspire to build a community of investors and pool in government funds as well to support this initiative. I think what we have to make very clear, or what I have to make very clear, is the government in Malaysia, the Malaysian government is very, very committed to push technology and innovation. We've got multiple support everywhere in almost every ministry around technology and innovation. But what's missing, in our view, is a sort of an orchestrator to bring everyone together.
Yep.
Right, so coherence is very important here. So we hope that TCA will be able to play that role. We're not owned by anyone. We're not going to own a space. We're not going to claim that we are doing all of this. But what we intend to do is bring the support together, bring an integrated support to build an integrated ecosystem for the technopreneurs in that sense.
Fantastic. Yeah, so essentially you'll be that bridge that needs to exist between
That's right.
the
That's
two
right.
dynamics. And
That's
you know,
right.
you speak I think today we wanted to talk a little bit about grants in general, and you talked about the different incentives and the different backing that the government has in terms of pushing R&D. Talk to us about grants, because that plays a big role in terms of driving both the academicians and also the corporate sector to kind of drive investments into R&D. How important are grants, and how are they an instrument that's used to drive deeper work in the R&D space?
So grants are absolutely necessary, okay, especially so in areas that are strategic, right? So in areas that are a little bit more commercially viable, like in digital or even those in the mobile space where you know the value proposition is just there, right? So you would have many investors willing to already seed these companies because they understand the business, right? They understand the business, they can understand the market. So I think it's not too hard for companies who are consumer facing in that sense, or very digital centric, to actually raise funds through investments or through seed funding. However, for companies that are a little bit more strategic in nature, especially those that require deep technology, that requires a lot more R&D, grants is definitely an instrument to help propel or develop the product. So I think, and MOSTI realizes this. Even under the ministry, we've got several programs to support several stages of development. So we still use something called the Technology Readiness Level, which is TRL. So we took it. It's a NASA standard. NASA no longer uses it, but we use it as a guide because it actually tells you the stage of readiness. 0 being, it's really on paper, and the stages it grows up to, where TRL 6 being where you have a product ready to be tested. Okay, 9 is you're ready for market lah. You're already at the market level. So what happens is that in MOSTI, we've got several buckets of grants to support R&D and technology levels, right? So in MOSTI, we've got something called the Technology Readiness Fund as well.
And these are all available. These are all available for organizations with technology that want to scale up.
These are available for organizations and public and private researchers to actually apply, right? So they are on our website right now, on the ministry's website. So that's one, you can apply. Of course, there are areas that we pegged to, right? So we've got 5 focus areas: healthcare, agriculture, climate change. Well, you can look into the website right now. I can't remember all 5.
Okay.
But
so
like I said, there are focused areas that you can apply under, right? So that's one. We also have something called the National Technology and Innovation Sandbox. So this is something that my team and I are very proud of, because this is something that we did last year. We launched this platform under the auspices of MOSTI, of course, and we presented this to the Economic Action Council, led by the minister at the time, where this was meant to be a platform to address entities or projects, so to speak, that have a ready prototype, ready to be tested, but requires further facilitation and funding to launch, right? So we actually provide commercialization grants of anywhere between 250 to 4 million under the National Technology and Innovation Fund, so anything above that, we provide a matching instrument. So it's, you go out, you get a corporate to support you, we will provide you matching equity amount in an equity format, right? So grants is very important. So what we do is we provide grants for them to test at site, improve on the products, and validate, right? Because usually to build your proof of concept, you need investments, and most often than not, because at that part of the value chain, risk is very high. So it's typically VCs are not interested, right? Unless those VCs are interested in strategic areas and they have appetite, right? They have the appetite, then you find VCs in the space, but most likely it's usually government grants that are going to support. So we take a view, or I personally take a view under what we're trying to do, is that at the early stage, especially in strategic areas, it is important for the government to support. Right, and it's not just for MOSTI. I think other entities also provide grants. KKMM provides digitalization grants under MDEC. And other government agencies do provide grants as well. MITI has, I think, an IR 4.0 grant. But yeah, so these grants set a foundation for you to build your business or build your technology to a point of scale, right? But for you to grow from that point of scale to reaching market access or, growing to a bigger market, grants no longer do you that good because you would need investors, because investors come in very different forms, right?
That's right.
You would have investors is deploying money, but you would also have investors that would deploy money and take you where you need to go because they understand the direction of your business. I think the smart thing to do is to find a smart investor that understand your business. So what we do is we advise companies as to at which stage, what kind of funding that you should, source out for. So you have also Cradle, and many people know Cradle Fund, which is also under MOSTI. So Cradle is also an entity that provide grants, right? So in the early days, we had 50,000, 150,000, and 500,000, right? And then when I came on board, we also introduced the equity model. So it was like a follow through. So you build your prototype, you commercialize, you test, you're ready for commercialization, you reach a certain milestone, you need to grow into bigger markets, you need to grow your entity, you need to start paying more people, then you get equity, right? So equity is usually deployed for growth. Grants, in simply put, is to develop your product.
Got it. And and we're going to continue this conversation because I want to talk a little bit about the connection between universities, business, and a couple other things. But we're going to take a quick short break for about 30 seconds. And as always, we're going to zoom in to Necole, one of the most powerful learning apps out there. So with that, here's a quick break with Necole.
Woi, bro.
Apa dia?
Aku message kau 50 kali, tak balas.
Alah bro, aku tak ada time lah bro message. Aku suka tengah Necole bro. Necole lah, itu dia in sekarang. Tengah trending tengah kacau.
Kau cakap apa? Apa tu?
Necole. Kau tak tahu Necole? Google kau tahu? Necole kau tak tahu? Tak, Necole app untuk belajar bro. Semua tengah belajar guna Necole sekarang. Ilmu semua tengah guna Necole.
Share sikit lah.
Boleh bro, kau tengok macam ni bro.
Okay.
Kau kalau kau lembab, kau kena Necole bro.
Memang aku lembab sikit sebenarnya.
Bro, kalau kau nak laju, kau nak top, kau nak jadi CEO, kau kena guna Necole. Kau tahu kena pergi mana? Digital.dynamic.org. 200 je bro tahun.
Aku buat tu aku tak lembab dah.
Tak tahu bro kapasiti kau macam mana. Tapi aku rasa Necole ni boleh tolong kau lah bro. Confirm.
Okay. Berapa?
RM200 je bro tahun.
Boleh lah duit raya pakai
Selamba bro. Ni kau tengok ni bro. Percaya bro, kau tengok ni. Ini daripada Howard bro. Power bro.
Oi, memang cantik.
Apa ni? Jangan ambil akunya.
Okay.
Aduh.
Sorry. Aku teruja sangat lah.
Ni tak apa kita tunggu sini.
Welcome back to Rethinking Balance Sheet. With us today is Dzuleira Abu Bakar, the Group CEO of TBM, soon to be TCA, I think. Welcome back. And we're talking about grants. And we've got a question from one of our guests. Daniel asked this question. He says, morning, Dzuleira. For those under government grants, does the ownership of the technology remain with the authors, business owners, or the government? So is it equity or is most of it just pure grants, I guess is the question.
Okay, so technology ownership, which is the intellectual property, right, of the entity, usually, most often than not, will be owned by the technology owner unless you license it out or unless you sell it to anyone, right? Licensing is selling, with a fee in return. But under government grants, usually the requirement is that you have ownership or you have proof of ownership of the technology. They will not take the technology away from you. Because you see, government grants ultimately is taxpayers' money. So we need to be very clear where the money is going, right? So we usually track according to spending milestone and we'll be very, very stringent in terms of the requirements of receiving those grants. We will need to know where the grants are going, what are your utilization, for how long you'd be using the grants for. But it has nothing to do with taking ownership of the technology or the IP in itself, right? Sometimes grants are actually given for you to actually acquire IP for the use of the entity.
And most of these grants have no equity component to it, right? I mean, at least for the government piece of it, right?
It depends. There are various instruments. Some grants are convertible over a certain period of time. When you meet a certain milestone, it can be converted into equity. But typically, grants are grants deployed over a period of time for a specific use case. Yeah.
So I think one quick question is, you talked a bit about the gap between corporates, universities, and the commercialization gap, or at least the product market fit gap, right? That exists.
Sure.
How best do we address this? I mean, and what's your thinking in terms of trying to close down this gap? So between companies, universities, the ecosystem, and then the market also, right? That dictates a lot of these is essentially product market fits that need to be adhered to. Your thoughts on this?
That's a loaded question that would require months and weeks of
If you
deliberation
can
to actually close the gap. No, I'm just saying. I'm
Agreed.
just sort of highlighting the complexity of the matter in that sense, right?
Yep,
I mean,
yep.
simply put, you address gaps by identifying where the gaps lie, right? And again, the gaps are between linkages. So we are trying here as an entity to bring everyone together. Hopefully, it would be like a marketplace where people know who are the sellers and who are the buyers. So we match technology producers to technology buyers or seekers, so to speak, right? Because corporates and government, for example, everyone wants to get on the technology bandwagon, rightly so, right? Digitalization, technology enablement is the way to go, right? If you're not on it, then you will remain behind, and everyone knows this and understands this fact. However, there's always a search. Oh, where can I find this technology? Where can I find someone who can build this for me? Simply put, in layman terms. And again, it's not something that can be resolved in one meeting or in one session. It's something that needs a structured, cohesive approach to actually bring everyone together. So we hope that through one integrated focus area, which is the TCA, we can bring everyone together. That's one way of bringing it together. But the other thing is, I think engagement with the community is also very important. So universities should reach out to industry. So whatever that you are, wherever that you are, and whatever that you're doing, I think the thinking should be that the universe is bigger than where you're operating in, right? So it linkages should always be made in order to find that match.
No, that's true. And I think it's both ways, right? I mean, for universities seeking
Both
and also
ways.
businesses needing to reach out to these
Yes.
talent and these capability.
Yes.
I think there's a quick question, and then I think Ravi has a couple of questions he wants to, I think he instigate, probably is a good word to use. Tatwise asks, as with other government websites, getting the necessary info or even the correct link is a challenge. Is there a link where we can access the availability of grants and the sectors that are focused on innovation? So I guess the question is there like a central depository? I assume this may be the role that TCA plays in the near future. But currently, is there a central depository of where all the grants are available?
Okay, that's a very good question, and that's a key problem in the market right now, and we are looking to address that. So we have a sister agency, which is Cradle. Cradle Fund is actually focusing on startups or entities that are looking to start the entity, because whilst they provide grants, they would also be looking to provide an integrated one-stop center. Whereas with TCA, we will be focusing on technology incubation as well as deep technology. Right, so we will provide that integrated support. So you will be getting it through TCA and Cradle, because sometimes it's also quite complicated to have everything in one website. It's not an open menu, so to speak, because the requirements are so diverse and unique at the same time. Right, but we will be making it very clear as to where, who can go where in that sense. Yeah.
And to some extent, Magic used to play that role in the past, right? To try to be sort of the channel, at least, or to channel you to. So Cradle's going to play that role going forward. That's fantastic.
So Cradle will focus on the early stage entities that are starting up. We will continue to focus on ecosystem support.
Yep, got it.
And deep tech.
Yep. Ravi?
Actually, I think Tatwise beat me to that question, because I think one of the things is if you're going to go down these grants and so on, people are busy. Obviously, they have to have the grit to do anything. I'm not going to make excuses for that. But firstly, thank you so much, Dzuleira. I think you've covered a lot of good ground. It's been an eye opener for me even in understanding this is something that I've not been very much part of, but more in the financial and banking sector. But this is an eye opener. But one of the things is just like for someone even like me, right? It is sitting out here, and if I were to go to the government, or I can imagine a businessman going out to the government. It's like a daunting task, let's be honest, Malaysia has huge trust deficit. We can push it under the carpet, but that's real. So I've been you hear horror stories. People say, oh, you want a grant, go see this consultant. How would you how do you assure businessmen like us, look, it's different now, under your stewardship, etc. We can have a smooth process to and a fair chance, I suppose, to getting the grant.
Yeah. So I think these are gaps, or these are issues and challenges that we have continued to look at, right? So improvements have been done. Unfortunately, maybe not fast enough. And I think on behalf of the ministry, we recognize that, and we're doing whatever it takes to improve, right? So which is why, going back to my point earlier, we realized that entities or startups or those that want to start their businesses need a one-stop center. Right. So if they're thinking of starting a startup, they should just be able to go online and say starting a startup in Malaysia, and then land into that page. So Cradle is coming up with that one-stop center, right? So just to let you know, and I think I won't speak too much about that. Rafiza should speak more on that. Yes. So Rafiza, that's a brilliant idea, right? And we're fully supportive of that.
We looked at that,
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea, and she came up with those suggestions. So from the TCA and Magic's perspective, we also, because the pie is big, you see, so we want to be able to actually support the ecosystem in a comprehensive manner. So from a technology readiness and technology support, so our focus will be technology and R&D. So we're saying our audience will be a little bit different. So we will work with the universities, with the public and private researchers and corporate sector. Our focus will be matching technology seekers and technology providers. And that is where you will have a one-stop center. Right? So, I mean, these improvements are well underway. So the platform should be up and running by January 2022. We are working on it right now because, again, it's a merger of two entities. So you can imagine how messy it is, Ravi. You've been in M&A and finance. So we are in that process right now, but things are well underway. The strategy is being laid out. So which is where we found all these gaps. Right? We found all these gaps. And we know it's troublesome and cumbersome for people out there in the market to come in and ask for grants or funding or support. But the other thing that we also want to reiterate is that, and I said this in many, many instances, sometimes you need to do your research and ensure that you're ready before you have that conversation with the government entities or the grant providers, for that matter. Because you can't come to, say, a grant provider and say, oh, you know what, I have this business, you have to support me. No, I think it's unfair. So entrepreneurs must do their homework, must ensure that they meet minimum criteria. Again, like I mentioned repeatedly, grants and even government money given out as equity are taxpayers' money. We have a responsibility to ensure that the money goes to the right people for the right purpose in the right manner. Right. So for us, integrity is top notch.
No, I think, Dzuleira, I'm not saying it just because you're on my show. I think you really do provide a lot of confidence to this. And I, on businessmen's side also, people make mistakes. It's as long as it's an honest mistake, that's fine. I mean, what's it? IBM turned down Microsoft, Sun Server, and SAS, isn't it? This SAP. They told what the Germans know about writing IT software, right? So so if IBM can make that kind of mistakes, I mean, what about
we can too? Exactly.
Yeah. So I
know, and trust me, we've had a lot of hit and miss.
Unfair, all that will come out. I guarantee you. But I think in the end of the day, I think when I was in government, etc. In the end of the day, as long as you can sleep it well at night, you've done your work honestly. That's really,
yes.
And
but on that point, we've had a lot of hit and miss. Like I said, we have had instances that we should have funded, but we didn't for whatever reason. So the regrets are always there, of course.
Yep. And maybe Dzuleira, I mean, I guess. Sorry. Yeah. So just to add to this, when you start looking at businesses, and if you were to provide some sort of advice to people like Ravi, myself, I mean the guys that are running the businesses, a couple of things are. One is how do you and this one you hit on, right? I mean, you say there are only 2 or 3. Couple more I mean, we can sort of count in our hands the number of guys that are on the journey towards becoming that unicorn, right? Essentially. So how do you prep yourself, and what should we be thinking in terms of one thing, the guys that say you got a potential to scale, but we just don't know how to get to that point of being able to get to that next level? What sort of advice would you impart to folks that are sort of stuck in that space where they just don't know how to take that next level to scale themselves?
I think a must-have characteristic of an entrepreneur founding an entity is curiosity curiosity and resourcefulness. So I think you must exercise that and really capitalize on that. You have to get out of the comfort zone. Sometimes building a business, and when you reach a certain point, you become comfortable, because building an entity and entrepreneurship is no walk in the park. It's the hardest thing, and my utmost respect to entrepreneurs, right? But you will reach a point where you're comfortable. Okay, you know what? I've reached my break-even point. I'm comfortable. I've got profits. I have enough money to pay my salaries. But I think that's the point where we reach our comfort level. So entrepreneurs need to break out of that, especially so if you have a strong value proposition, if your technology is actually solving real problems. And I don't say this at 1,000 or 10,000 feet level. Yeah, solving real problems is a real thing. You need to be able to create products and solutions that are really, really addressing real problems, real issues, right? And if you know that you're addressing real issues, you should push further. Right? You should push further. And I think this is why we are all out here promoting what we're doing, not for ourselves, but promoting this for the country, right? So we want entrepreneurs, we want researchers to reach out to us. So we will be doing more and more engagements through the TCA model to actually reach out to researchers. Because again, like I mentioned earlier, I think we've done quite well in terms of the digital and the platform space. Where we really need to dig deeper and find gems is in the deep technology area. Machine learning, artificial intelligence, blockchain, there's really core technology development, which at this point we're still importing.
No, that's true. That's true. Yeah. And how would that change? I mean, how can that change? Because that's also a capability of the entire ecosystem, right? I mean, the education. That's going to be tough to just overnight try to get people into that space, right?
Yeah. So it's definitely not something that can be done in the short term, but we have all the right building blocks. And I think this is where local talent, local universities, local researchers should be given the platform to shine, right? We should pay a lot more attention to what is happening in our local universities, right? And in fact, I think this is also time for us to look at funding R&D within the universities. Right? Because I don't think we have shortage of talent. We actually have shortage of integrated support in terms of bringing them up to speed, in terms of the type of support, in terms of lecturers, awareness, in terms of labs, facilities for them to test and try their products within a safe and confined space within what they're operating in universities. So I think so yeah, again, technology, innovation, education needs to align to national strategy.
Yep.
So that's how we actually can build strong talent in this area.
Great. Ravi, you wanted to question a bit. You want to have some questions on SMEs, right?
No, I think one of the things is you're talking about finding solution that actually, how do you find solutions for the SMEs? I think that hit a nail on the right spot. So I think when we got some solutions, I think people should be going and talking to people like Dzuleira and seeing how they can bring it, because that resonates with me, when you say, if you got an idea, please go out and sorry. But my only comment was this, is that you'll be amazed. I wrote a paper right in the beginning of the which was published on The Age. I think that Anwar helped publish with me on The Age. And one of the things we said, watch this space on the pandemic. So much new stuff will come out. This was right in the beginning, because you just look at the Second World War, just how many new things came out during that short 5-year span. And it's the same. Nothing like the pandemic to get the entrepreneurs going, I suppose, or a crisis.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's no question there. Just.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, of course.
Just
I
reflecting on what
totally
you said.
agree.
Yeah.
Ravi's so mesmerized by what you've said that he just has this thoughtful reflection.
No. I totally agree, and I think the constraints of the pandemic really pushed the entrepreneurs to an uncharted territory, right? And they really pushed forward. I'm very proud of all of them, really.
This show is one of it.
Absolutely.
Getting Ravi to appear on a show was something in itself, right? So
yeah, so we're all comfortable. Exactly what Dzuleira was saying. We're all doing okay. Oh, that's fine. But
it just takes one COVID pandemic, one small virus.
The next holiday in Europe or Australia or whatever it is, suddenly can't go anywhere. Well, let's think of rethinking balance sheets, right?
Exactly.
And as we wrap up the show, I'd love to hear some of your final thoughts. Whether it's advice or nuggets of wisdom that you want to impart to our listeners, or maybe even your hopes and aspiration for TCA, TPM, and R&D specifically in Malaysia. Dzuleira, your final thoughts?
Yeah. So I mean. I'd like to think that I'm rather idealistic about the state of the tech and innovation in this country. And I think rightly so, because we have everything. We have the right talent. We have passionate, dedicated entrepreneurs who are there, but we just need to identify them, give them the necessary support. And I think until we reach you, or until you reach us, I think you need to be patient, right? So my message is be patient. Keep at it, and continue to innovate and build products that is needed, right? That is needed. Identify, go out and look for problems out there. I think there's just so many simple problems out there that need solution. And solutions these days are through tech and innovation. And I think we also need to look at tech and innovation as providing access, right? Tech and innovation is so liberating in the sense that it actually can have the potential of lifting a society or a small group of community up, right? So I think we need to look at that from that big perspective. And the government is here. We are here to help the entrepreneurs. There's a lot happening in the background, although sometimes we have to be very careful in terms of coming out in a very sporadic manner, which is why we are actually planning this very, very carefully. And there will be a lot more announcements coming up, especially around TCA. We are working on that in the background. The team is working very hard. So yeah, just stay tuned, be patient, and keep at it. And I think we've all done very well given the constraints, the limitation, and the challenges that has been on us in the last 2 years.
Absolutely.
2020 and 2021, you've just got to write it off.
Absolutely. And as always, Ravi sort of summarizes. Ravi's deep in thought. Look at him, and he's. I think this conversation has really triggered a lot of insights and understanding. So Ravi, as we wrap up the show, your final thoughts and your sort of quick key takeaways.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm always concerned is all these things about this trust issues. I think if take it. I mean, don't take it from me. I know Rafiza for donkeys years, and I have absolute confidence in her. Dzuleira, the first time I met, and I think you take your own view on it. Is this an agency you can work with? For me, the answer is definitely yes. Yeah, and I say to the entrepreneurs out there, work with these people. This sounds like very good people. Please go and work with them. If you're outside Malaysia, I'm not sure what the answer to that one is, but at least if you're in Malaysia, please go and work with these people. Yeah, if you got a problem to get your product going, to get your business to the next level, have a chat with them. You've got nothing to lose. That's the least I can say about this.
All right. And of course, you can always go to tpm.com.my to get more information. Dzuleira, thank you so much for being on this show. For those of you who have not got your copy or you got your access to Necole, make sure you go to necole.app and unleash it. Or if it's for your employees, go to necole.tech. With that, Dzuleira, thank you so much. It's been super exciting having this conversation. We must have many, many more conversations because I think this is a absolute space that's ripe for the taking. It's a great opportunity. And I think, like you said, if we can make that connection, if you can build that ecosystem between the public, the private, and the universities, and all these different players in the ecosystem, and figure out how to get the deep tech investments into the right hands and the right spaces and enable that to grow, I just see us flourishing in such an amazing way. So thank you so much again for this. We've been, Dzuleira, your final thoughts as we close this out, and then we will wrap up the show. Any final?
Oh, thank you for having me here. I think it's quite liberating to be able to speak about this in a very sort of unstructured manner. Like I said, I'm very idealistic about the whole tech and innovation space for the country. We can and we will do it. So keep the faith. Ravi's right. There's trust issues, but keep the faith. We are here to make things happen.
Absolutely. So keep the faith, and happy Friday to you. Have a fantastic weekend.
Happy Friday.
And this is Rethinking Balance Sheets signing out. We'll see you next week, same time, same place.